Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to class. We're going to do a bit of a demo on Photoshop to create an animation using our video timeline. This time, I'm going to show you a bit of an example first. So here's the example that we made in class the other day. Keep in mind, it is very short. That's how short it is. It was 5 frames of animation, so it really is just fire moving. So we're going to learn a couple different options, and in terms of what visually you create, it's up to you. We can go with the flame idea, which we seemed to like in class last time, or we can differ slightly. Here's another video option just to show you kind of, different potentials and different sizes. So this animation that you'll look at now is 33 frames, not 33 frames, 33 layers with, how many frames? Quite a few frames here, more than that, because I'm doing double the frames. So you do the math, 33 times 2, 66 frames. Yeah, see how long this one is? So it's on repeat, but you get a sense for, in terms of length, how many frames and how long it actually takes. Keep in mind that our goal is 24 frames per second. It might seem a bit long, but as you play with different approaches, you can see that it becomes easier to create a longer video. For my example, I've copied some of these frames, so there is some repetition, and all that's happening, all that you're seeing happening, is the movement of the eye. So some of that I could use and double up the back and forth. Okay, so let's start from the beginning and create a new one so we don't get too confused. So I'm going to go to File and New. In terms of how big it is, I'd like to work on a square for this, and I'm just going to keep a standard resolution. And if I move this over, I'm going to hit Create. So my timeline's already open at the bottom, and in class we're ready to go, but keep in mind you go to the window and then down and click timeline, and you're going to create a video timeline. So there's a couple things that we need to do like straight off the jump, and really what it is the whole problem with working on Photoshop and doing animation on Photoshop is this one problem here. So as you can see at the bottom, it tells us how big our screen is, how big our track area here, our timeline area is. We're actually looking at it very small. So let's zoom in. And when you zoom in, you'll be able to see the frames. And you can see at the very top that there's no frame, and then there's 0, 1F, and 0, 2F. That's dictating the amount of frames that you have in your video. So as we've already talked about, ideally, our animations take up either 1 to 2 frames, and I suggest working on 2 frames. I think it works fine. But here you can see that this image, this layer that we're looking at, is actually running very, very, very long, and is minutes of frames. So what we need to do is shorten it so that it makes sense for what we're doing, so that the image that we create in this layer only appears as 1 or 2 frames of time. So if I hover over the bottom and I've scrolled all the way to the very end of that layer, the end of the purple, and I have a little black line with 2 arrows. This is how I drag my frame. So this will work for any frame that you're working with for any layer. If you'd like to make it longer or shorter, this is how you would do it. And if you're in class, you can look on the board. Hopefully you're following along. And the arrow itself, obviously, you just click and move. So what we need to do is we need to shorten this layer to about 1 or 2 frames of time. So let's pull it, and then we're just going to pull it all the way to the end. And remember, we're zoomed all the way in, so it's going to take us some time. You can see that we're working with like minutes of time, and we want to work with less than seconds. So here we go. Here we go. There you go. So I'm going to leave it at 1 frame just for now. Actually, we can move it to 2. So that's kind of what we're looking at in terms of time for our animation. That's how long we want to work. I'm just going to shut the lights off in class to make things easier. Is this off? Can you hear me? Yes. I'm sorry that my back is to you. I don't mean it. Okay, so that's our first layer. Now, the easiest approach for me, and as you can see, if I create a new layer, it's going to create a new layer on my timeline down there. So I just use my regular button to add a layer. And again, we're working on layers for this project. And here is the problem, that it adds another layer and it makes it super, super long. again. So what we would essentially, like in theory, have to do is to make each one of those layers shorter and shorter, or as short as we need them to be, and manipulate them that way. I think that's a bit of a waste of time. So I'm going to undo that. What I find more useful, and if hopefully it will work just as easy for you, is to create that first layer, bring it to the amount of frames that you'd want it. In this case, it's 2 frames, and simply Command C to copy it and Command V to paste it. And that will paste it to the right amount of frames that you want. Now, the second thing that you need to do to get going is to create a video, in essence, like a video of layers. Is you just need to click on one of the layers. I'm going to click on layer 0, I guess, and you're going to move it up to be on the same timeline as the other video that or other layer that you've already created. When I did that, you will notice that it became a video group. That is good. That's what we want. So now when I create my frames, and even if I create a new layer, it's going to, first of all, make it too long, but second of all, it at least will add it to the right space, like to the right place, exactly where I want it. So it depends on your process and kind of experiment with it. What might be a good idea is to have like a blank layer itself, existing somewhere else. And again, like you could always move it onto its own layer. But what I'd like to do is think about how long I want my first animation to be. In this case, I kind of have a plan already. I know what I'm going to do at the start, and I know what I'm going to do at the end, and I have a rough idea of how long I want it to be. What I do, and as you're kind of working, I do it in different ways, but I will copy my layers now so that I have like a setup for my animation, and then I just need to go back and start drawing within those different layers. Everybody has their different process, and if you don't find it too annoying to scale down each layer as you put in your frames, you can take that process too. But what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to paste a bunch of layers. Let's see how many I got now. 5 or 6. Perfect. I got 6 different layers. So unlike the frame animation where you have to turn on the eyes and turn off the eyes and make sure everything is in the right space, you don't have to do that here. It's all already done for you. You've already dictated, which images are going to be visible when, based on the frames. You do have to pay attention to the layers, that you're on the right layer as you move, but for the most part, the program itself is going to tell you if you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And as you can see, it maybe click on the layer to draw that layer, and then you can see that the right layer is highlighted, that layer 1 is actually highlighted. I do also recommend naming your layers, but I'm going to skip that process for the sake of time. So let's decide what we're going to draw. Maybe should we just do the fire guy again in class? Fire guy? Okay, fire guy it is. So I'm just grabbing my paintbrush. I'm not going to be creating anything super beautiful today, so forgive me, I guess. I'm just going to create something simple, again, for the sake of time. So let's draw our first character. And what we're going to do is, for this animation, we'll just draw a character in the middle. And then what we're going to be animating is the space around him, which will be the fire. So we only have really one thing to worry about. And because of the object that we've chosen, fire, as we know from the video that we watched earlier today, the principles of animation, that, there's some intuitiveness to flames and some chance. I recommend studying a flame or looking at a flame before you draw it and try to animate it. We're just going to play along and guess and experiment a little bit, which is totally okay. So let's start by drawing our guy in our very first one. Okay, a little bit of pressure there. Hold on. So I'm just going to draw a kind of scary guy. I don't know. Ooh, he's scary. And I'm going to give him a head. That's not very good. Okay, good enough. So I don't have to be too picky. Okay, so there's my guy. I can color him in if I want. Maybe I'm going to make him like that. That looks good. You can add details if you like for this process, but feel free to not. So what I have to do now is to copy my character throughout the layers, so that because he's the thing that will stay the same. He's not going to move. It's going to be everything around him that moves. What I'm actually going to do is maybe center him better. Can I center him better? No, it won't let me do it. Okay. That's fine. I'm going to leave him as he is. So what you could have done is then copy this layer with your drawing, and I'll show you what that means. You can see that he just becomes another layer. Or you could copy the character and then move him onto each layer. For the sake of time, once again, I'm just going to copy the layers themselves. So, oopsies. I'm just going to copy him 5 or 6 times, and then I'm just going to delete my blank layers for now, saving time. Okay, so it looks like I have quite a few layers of my guy. I'm going to check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. So I recommend, again, naming your layers to make your life easier, but here we are making mistakes. So now it's time to actually animate. And it's relatively easy. You're going to be working frame from frame and making the changes that you want to make based on what you did before. And I'm just going to point out a couple helpful tips. So I'm already changed my pen to the red for the fire. I'm just going to click on my first layer. You need to have your first layer activated. And of course, you're on the actual layer and on the frame to start drawing on it. It will not let you draw on it if you have not clicked it. And now what I'm going to do is just draw some fire around this guy. I'm going to have to get creative because he's kind of in a weird spot. Okay, let's say that I'm happy with that drawing of fire. Good enough for now. So now if I move on to my next frame, you can see that the fire disappears. And the question, hopefully, is raised in your head, well, how am I going to make this animation look smooth? And the answer to that is the onion skin. So if you look on the right-hand side, you have the 3 lines. You're going to click there, and you're going to click Enable Onion Skins. When you enable the onion skin, and I like that I have to move back for it to work. When you enable the onion skin, there it is. You can see that it looks like the layer before it, and there's the layer before. You can see it, but it's a little bit lighter. It's a little bit more opaque. You can change the settings of the onion skin. Here, onion skin settings, so you can ask like how many times you want to see your onion skins, what it's going to look like, and you can make those changes. I'm just going to keep it 1, so I'm just going to be able to see the onion skin before and after as I draw. So now that I can see this onion skin, and if I was creating somebody walking down the street, this would be very important. I need to know, where their feet were the frame before, so that when I draw the next frame, that I make it look accurate, that I make it look correct for our animation. In this case, I'm drawing fire, so it just gives me a good guideline. I'm going to zoom in slightly and shrink my timeline to make my life a little easier. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace over some of this, but not all of it. So I am on my next layer, as you can see. I just want to have like a clear kind of, this might stay the same, but this part is going to differ, and this flame is going to have moved, and just make the necessary changes or subtle changes that you'd like to make from frame to frame. Like, again, depending on what you're depicting, how accurate you are or how close you are to the last frame, those things become more or less important. So as you can see, I have my onion skin, I have my lighter flame from the frame before, and then the one that I just drew. Now, if I go forward, you can see that it disappears. That means that it's not visible on that actual frame. It's only visible in the space between, so that I can create an accurate image. So now, again, I'm on the second frame. When I want to draw the third one, I just move over and click on the next frame. It's going to jump me there in my layers. And my onion skin is activated. So it's showing me my second drawing of the flame. So now when I draw the third flame, I can then play off of that one. So I'm going to repeat the process that I just took, keeping some of my flame the same, and then making necessary changes to make it look like it's, leg. Let me try that again. Oh, good. Sorry, the computer seems to have messed up on me. I'm trying to share my screen with the projector and record my screen at the same time. So, oops, I'm just going to redraw that second flame. Pretend this didn't happen. Well, my first attempt was much better. Okay, perfect. Now to my next one. You do have to move the little blue timeline. It's telling you where, like, what part of the video you're watching. You do have to move that along as you draw. Okay, so finally on my third flame. Wow, I just can't draw a pointy line today. Great. And then I'm just going to complete this process throughout the animation. So bear with me a little bit, especially you in class, draw along, complete as many flames as you can. Okay, great. Now I'm on layer 10, or technically, what is that, like fourth, fifth layer? So as we finish this animation, we definitely need to think about the principles of animation. So the jumps that I have between my flames, like how different they are, how much I change them. And I'm really being completely random with my drawing of the flame. I'm kind of following what I did before, but I'm just kind of guessing the different changes. So this might not be a smooth animation, but that's kind of what, it's up to you to decide what makes a smooth animation, what depending on what you're drawing, how are you depicting it? How many different keynotes do you need in between each movement for it to make sense? Okay, so now that I have all of my layers and all of my flames, I'm going to turn off the onion skin because when you preview it in Photoshop, if the onion skin is still on, you will see that as it switches. So starting with my first layer, I'm just going to go here and push play. I do recommend having the loop playback on. And I'll shrink this a bit if it'll let me. It won't let me. No, it won't let me. Okay, I'll play this for you so you can see what happens. And there's my animation. So it's looping around, but you can see it looks kind of like the flame around the character is moving. So that's we can keep it simple and just go there. Of course, there's things like adding audio tracks, and then, for instance, adding different motions to your individual frames. You can play with transitions as well. That are visible here. So there's lots of options that you can do, but this is just to keep it simple as a practice, as an experiment. Now to play with the exporting, a little bit different than we did last time. So to save this image, because it's an animation, you want to save it as a video, right? Like you essentially made a video. You did make a video. You've made a video. Let's save it. So we're going to hit File. We're going to hit Export. And then we're going to render video. Depending on how long it is, it will take a different amount of time to render it. So keep that in mind. It's going to ask you what you want to name it. I'm going to name it Flame Practice Guy. Where you want it to go, I'm putting it on my desktop. And then you have options about, how big you'd like it to be, how many frame rates there are, that kind of thing. So you can make those changes. I'm just going to render it. And hopefully it will just save it to my desktop. Well, I know it will, so I'll shrink this. For now, I'll shrink this guy and you. And in this very messy version of my desktop, everything is kind of smushed. Oh, here he is. Here's my flame. So it'll save it as an MP4, which is pretty cool. And then that's how long it actually is. As you can see, it's very, very short when you don't have it looped, but it's turned it into a video. So that's how you'd save it and export it, so that you'd have an MOV. And then, of course, if you have, something happening, it's a little bit longer than the really 0 seconds that mine is. Sorry, one thing that I forgot to point out that I want to bring you back to the Photoshop for is depicting how many frames that we're seeing here. I'm just seeing if it's elsewhere. Okay. It's not. So when I opened my Photoshop, because I've already working in it, I had already made this change, and what I had done is changed how many frames per second, so kind of how fast it's moving. You can see here's my frame rate, so you can make those changes and make it move slower or faster. For instance, if I put at 15 and hit OK, you can see that it's going to move slightly different than if I go back and change it to 24 frames. So when you create your plan, and you can see there it's moving like slightly differently. So when you start your plan for your animation project, that's something that you need to consider beforehand, so that when you start creating and as you're making your animation, you know how many frames we're going to be seeing per second. I recommend 24, and then for one single image to be 2 frames in itself. Okay, that's it. That's the quick demo. That's how to make an animation in the video timeline on Photoshop and save it as an MOV. Again, I recommend to explore this process and look at the variety of options that are available to you. It's not just, moving one single object like you're seeing me do. You can fully animate and through this process. Okay, any questions, send me an email. Thank you for coming. Goodbye. Oh. Where do I turn them off? Oh, here.